So, I spent most of the show so far talking about continuity, as opposed to that nutty Fahrenheit 9/11 idea that once upon a time there was this benevolent American capitalism, this wonderfully kind multi-military industrial complex that got hijacked by these neocons, these horrible neocons who changed the otherwise benevolent face of American capitalism and made it into something nasty. 'Twas ever thus, 'twas ever thus. You know, populations, the ruling class already used spying on the domestic population to control us through fear. But from now to the end of the show, I want to talk about a radical discontinuity, because we are entering, I believe, a totally new era, an epochal new era, with peak oil. Petroleum geologists are divided. Some say it could be 2009, some say it could be 2005, 2007, 2010. Whenever we pass the peak, whenever the great rollover happens, from then on, we enter an era in which with every year, there is less and less net energy available to humankind no matter what we do. And to find an analogy to this phenomenon, you've got to go back in epochal terms to the collapse of the last complex civilizations, the Mayans and the Roman Empire. They didn't just end because people got bored of being Mayans and Romans. The last day, you didn't have the high priest of the Mayans coming out onto the temple steps at Chichen Itza dressed in his robes one solstice morning going, hey, oh, this is bollocks, this is, isn't it? What am I doing? And the last days of Rome, it wasn't just a few people turning up at the Colosseum, about 30 people dotted around the ground, and the gladiators, their hearts aren't in here and there. Even the lions are bored. Most of the gladiators end up playing dandy racquetball or Gaylord tennis, but the point scoring is devilishly difficult because of the hot Roman sun. And societies, when there's cheap, abundant energy, be it topsoil or Greek slaves, societies kind of diversify and grow and become more complex and have agriculture and trade at a distance. When the strategies for energy capture are subject to the law of diminishing returns, that's when complex societies collapse. Now, there's a great book out at the minute by a guy called Richard Heinberg called The Party's Over: Oil, War and the Fate of Industrial Society. Although I sometimes suspect that it's because my own life is so empty that I'm attracted to a book whose title is The Party's Over. Yeah, Jude Law swanning around the world with all your actresses. Well, guess what? The party's over. And all you young people dancing in the discotheques with each other and having free love. Well, excuse me while I take the needle off the record, put those lights out, candles, and from now on, no more drum and bass, it's just drum. The party's over. Heinberg's thesis is that industrial society is the term that we call the world that oil made. The way that we totally refashioned our society since, the first discoveries at Titusville, Pennsylvania in 1859. And when oil becomes scarce, it's the collapse of industrial society. And in the face of this massive social change that's coming, people are in denial and they reach for the techno fix. Oh, the scientists will figure something out. And there's such a lot of messianic techno-utopianism, such a lot of hype about hydrogen. Well, we'll just switch to hydrogen. Folks, there are no hydrogen reservoirs beneath the Chilterns. You make hydrogen fuel cells using fossil fuels. Yeah, it's not totally useless. You can use it to store wave and wind energy, but it's not an energy source. Nuclear produces 75% as much carbon as coal-fired gas station in its mining and milling and production and decommissioning. There is no way out. But we are suckers and we want to believe. Some of the next thing, I don't want to bum you out totally, right? There is some hope, but there's no one's investing in it. Like zinc air fuel cells, if you must have cars in the future in atomized communities, the car of the future can be powered by zinc air fuel pellets, and they produce a zinc oxide as a non-toxic byproduct. And zinc oxide is a thick, viscous, creamy white substance which can be recycled into fresh zinc pellets using electrolysis and walnut oil. The catalyst has to be a non-carbon organic compound, and what they're using at the Stanford University, where they're doing research into this, is thermobroma cacao, or cocoa solids. And so as the car of the future goes along, powered by its zinc fuel cells, out the back on a little tray is produced a row of conical, white, viscous substances surrounded by a chocolate whirl with a walnut on the top. There is no way out. Social change is coming. Whether we're going to be agents of that change or passive victims is the only choice, because food is oil. Since the pesticide revolution in the 60s, there is the oil we eat. You know, you think the top story of every news item every night would be, when the oil runs out, how are we going to feed ourselves? By the way, there's a book out at the minute called Who Will Feed China? Wake-up call for a small planet. Although I think they're asking the wrong question. It should, of course, be when will feed China? Who will feed Europe? Who will feed South America? You know? No one's investing in this stuff. One place doing any research into this, the Ecology Institute in Willits, California. And for 25 years, they've been researching into this. And they've said, OK, let's suppose that there's 7.5 billion of us in the middle of the 21st century. OK, what's the minimum amount of land per person we need to devote to agriculture to support a population of 7.5 billion without fossil fuels? 2,800 square feet is what they've come up with. And so it's doable, although their calculations are based upon bio-intensive farming, a strictly vegan diet, and the composting of all plant and human wastes, including post-mortem humans. A kind of scary concept at first, slightly shocking, but I think in time, especially if the rich and the famous do it first, it could have its own dignity and its own gravitas. You know, we go into the Vatican garden and there's a large cylindrical composting drum, and one of the cardinals is there saying, well, it's a year now since Pope John Paul II sadly passed away, so let's give him a turn. Oh, look at that, he's mulched up lovely for a leathery old bird, look at that. And let's spread this rich humusy compost over the Swedes and beetroot and cabbage so beloved of his native Poland. Oh, a Glasgow Rangers tattoo, he kept that quiet. Jokes I didn't do in Belfast, Part 1. In strictly geological terms, peak oil it means that moment when you pass, there's half of all the oil that's in the ground. But you see, most of that oil, you take more oil getting it out than you get from the oil. In 1974, that became 1 to 1. In our own time, that's 1,000 to 1 because of oil-based fertilizers, pesticides, insecticides, tractors, combine harvesters, refrigeration, and 4-figure food miles. And it's not like something's going to happen in the future that might happen peak oil. It's already happened to most places. Colombia passed its peak in 2004, British North Sea 2000, Trinidad and Tobago in 77, Iran 76, the USA in 1970. Now, in 1973, the House Subcommittee on Foreign Relations published a report called Oil Fields as Military Objectives, a Feasibility Study, now known as an American plan to bring democracy to the Middle East. Not because the US is more evil than anybody else, though. They just had more capability. I'm sure in 1977, Trinidad commissioned a document called Oil Fields as Military Objectives. They just found it wasn't so feasible. Tell us the full strength of our Navy. Is that including jet skis, sir? Yes, it's including the jet ski. But here's Catch-22. Catch-22 is the very worst thing, of course, that can befall humankind is we discover huge lakes of oil, huge amounts of new oil, because the climate chaos that would wreak would make the mere collapse of industrial society as nothing next to the ecological holocaust and meltdown. But it's still savable. We still have time, we've still got energy, we've still got electric grid that works more than an hour a day. We've still got some money to invest in renewables rather than in armies and navies to go scurrying around the planet finding the final deposits of the last hours of ancient sunlight. But it's going to mean taking the hand of the petrochemical corporations off of democracy, which is going to mean that for once in our lives, we're going to have to get up off our arses and do something. Us. Now, when I first